Hello and welcome back to the 80s Toy Museum, and this sign is actually made by Eric, who just joined me on the latest movie commentary for Tron. So thanks again, Eric, for this sign, getting lots of good use out of it. Today is a wish list video talking about figures that I hope Big Rubber Guys gets around to. So if you're not aware, Big Rubber Guys are new LJN style wrestling figures. And there are two of them right here, Demolition, Axe and Smash. And these were available on MajorBendies.com. They are sold out. These are short runs. So if you don't get the pre-orders the month they're available, you're out of luck. eBay is your only option, and they really shoot up in value. These are fantastic. I didn't buy too many toys last year, but these are right at the top of the list of some of my favorite toys that came out last year. Huge unfinished business itch scratched here. Because back in the 80s, they only made Axe. They never got around to making Smash. So it's great to just have both guys available. They look fantastic. These are Jack's tag team belts, because the demos need some gold around their waist. Three-peat tag team champions. The price on them, it was $50 US each. So a little high. If you only exclusively buy toys at retail, yeah, that's going to seem high. But if you buy toys at toy shows or on eBay, that probably seems a little low compared to other clones. So I've got another clone up here. This is a clone of Hogan version 2, and that went for over $100, something like that. And the quality it's pretty close to original LJN. And then this is a masterpiece right here. This is by XOXByRandomTreasures, and it's really nice. They've fixed a bunch of the problems that the original LJN one had. The skin tone looks correct. I like the lighter hair on it, and then they'll paint it whatever way you want it painted, so you don't actually have to get the original LJN paint job if you don't want. But you're going to pay for their time. It's hand painted. So by comparison, $50 a figure, so expensive compared to wrestling figures that are on the shelf at Walmart right now, but still way less than what other clones are going for. And they look fantastic too. It seems like they're factory produced. Really nice paint job on them. So I think they're fantastic. They add so much to the shelf right here. Didn't realize how incomplete the shelf looked until I added the demos. They're such a huge part of 80s WWF. So here's a list of figures that I hope that they get around to. My top 5 of wrestlers that never got an LJN figure back in the 80s. And I hope they get around to finally doing that'll fit in perfectly with the rest of these guys. 80s WWF wrestlers. I might do NWA in a future video because they're doing some great NWA figures too. They got Magnum TA coming out, and they had Ric Flair not long ago. 90s figures, might do that in the future as well, but just to kick it off, these are my top 5 80s wrestlers that never got a figure in the WWF in the LJN Superstar line that I hope Big Rubber Guys gets around to making.
Number 5.
I pity the fool who can't recreate the main event from WrestleMania 1, and I'm one of them. How about we finally get to complete the WrestleMania 1 main event and get a Mr. T figure? We've already got 3 of the other participants in the WrestleMania 1 main event tag team match. We've got Piper and Orndorff on the one side. We've even got their corner man, Bob Orton. And on the other side, we've got Hogan. They made a Snuka, the corner man, but we need that Mr. T figure in the red trunks. I think one of the most iconic shots from not just that match, but from that WrestleMania overall is Mr. T hoisting Piper up in the fireman's carry. Piper thought it was important that Mr. T stuck to amateur wrestling moves instead of trying to be a pro wrestler in the match with suplexes and body slams. So having his arms positioned so that you can stick a Roddy Piper on his back would look great. And his accessory, obviously, would be a whole bunch of gold, removable gold chains, similar to how the modern Mr. T figures do it.
Number 4.
Since this is a dream list, I think it's important to include a dream. And no, I'm not talking about the African dream, Akeem. This is a list of guys who never got a figure, not a list of do-overs. And trust me, there's a couple guys I'd love for them to do over. But Akeem technically already had a figure with the one-man gang. So instead, number 4 is the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. The Bull of the Woods just snuck onto this list because he did come to the WWF in 1989. Most of his memorable stuff is from 1990 there, but technically he could be an 80s WWF LJN style wrestler. He would have to be adorned in the polka dots. Some of the diehard old school Dusty fans from his NWA days or the Florida days might snub their nose at the polka dots, but there's so many kids who grew up on the polka dots, and if anyone could make polka dots cool, it's Dusty Rhodes, and he did. For the pose, it would have to be this pose right here. It's iconic. I remember it from the t-shirt and from some Dusty Rhodes graphics in the magazines. Dusty proved that big men can dance, and sometimes it's actually to their advantage because they got that momentum, baby. Give him the cowboy boots, the polka dot shirt, and the headband, the bionic elbow, and he doesn't really need an accessory, but I think a cool bonus would be the nightstick from his first big feud, which was with the Big Boss Man. And I think you'd be able to sculpt the hand so that it looked good with or without the nightstick, because if you look at this picture right here, you could have him pointing forward so that the hand doesn't really look all that awkward if it's not holding anything, but you could also just slip the nightstick through there and have the Dream dispense law and order, if you will, on the Big Boss Man.
Number 3.
The man of the hour, the man with the power, too sweet to be sour, the women's pet, the men's regret, what you see is what you get, and what you don't is better yet. It's the original superstar of wrestling, Superstar Billy Graham. I was too young to see his initial big run in New York when he was WWF champion, but I loved the Superstar in 1987 when he made his big comeback. There's two options for an 80s WWF Superstar Billy Graham figure. They could either go with the in-ring look, which was very short before he got injured, and then there's the manager look, when he was managing Don the Rock Morocco, who needs a redo himself in tie-dye. But just like they found out in 87 and 88, the original Superstar is too big a personality to just be somebody's manager standing silently in the corner. So give us the in-ring Billy Graham with tie-dye tights, flexing one of the 23-inch pythons. Yes, for those who don't know, Hulk Hogan stole the term pythons for his arms from the original Superstar. The two-toned goatee. And for the accessories, there's two ways you could go here. You could give him a non-removable tie-dye tank top, and then his accessory could be removable sunglasses. Could just use the same mold from the recent Sergeant Slaughter figure. Or instead of sculpting a tank top onto him, you could give him one of these awesome tie-dye ponchos. But if it's made of plastic, it might be a little tricky to make it fit over the bicep shot pose. The original LJN toy line was called Wrestling Superstars, so I think it's about time the original Superstar finally gets himself a Superstars style figure.
Number 2.
I think this choice would be absolutely perfect. A lot of Mr. Perfect's memorable moments from the WWF are from the 90s, but he did actually debut in 1988. I think the lime green singlet looks more 80s Mr. Perfect than the yellow or the blue, which looks more 90s Mr. Perfect. The pose is a tricky one because you could ruin the figure doing a typical Mr. Perfect pose. You definitely don't want hands on the hips like that Rick Rude figure had. You don't want the arms crossed either. Hands at the side looks kind of boring, but I think it would be the most appropriate pose for this particular figure, since having arms up and ready to fight like a lot of other LJN figures just takes away the coolness of Mr. Perfect. Or have the hands reaching out to the sides in a Bret Hart How About It style pose. This might be the best option because it looks cocky and arrogant, but also lets the hand hold the accessory, which would be his towel, which you could throw over his shoulder and his manager Bobby Heenan could catch perfectly every time.
Number 1.
It's Ghetto Blaster time, fool. Bad News Brown is a must-have for any vintage LJN collection, I think. For the younger fans who aren't familiar with who this man is, I'll put it this way. Bad News walked so that Stone Cold could run. When Steve Austin made the shift from stunning to stone cold, I saw so many similarities between his new Stone Cold character and Bad News Brown. The loner who lived by the motto DTA, in an era where so many heels had a dastardly manager pulling the strings behind them. Bad News Brown walked alone and didn't trust the faces or the other heels. He had one of the coolest finishers back then too, the Ghetto Blaster, an enziguri to the back of the head when no one was doing enzigiris. It was instant lights out, just like the DDT. The pose is a tricky one, just like Mr. Perfect. His standard pose is arms crossed, which you can't really do for an LJN figure. You could have him with fists forward and ready to fight, but I think the coolest pose would be to somehow incorporate the Ghetto Blaster. Give him a pose with one arm raised when he's standing, but you can also use it to brace him on the ground and put one of his legs behind his opponent's head so that you can be giving other LJN figures the Ghetto Blaster. For the accessory, well, Bad News doesn't really need one. He doesn't need anybody and he doesn't need anything. But if they had some plastic left over and wanted to give him something, the only thing he ever took to the ring for a short period of time was a giant rat when he was feuding with Jake the Snake Roberts. I think the problem with giving him the rat though is it really distracts from Bad News himself. It's fine including Matilda with the Bulldogs because that was their gimmick, they were the British Bulldogs. And it's fine including a snake with Jake the Snake because he's Jake the Snake, it's part of his gimmick. But Bad News' mutant sewer rat isn't really part of his gimmick. In fact, it goes against his gimmick. I don't think Bad News has any use for pets either. For the people who thought Steve Austin was a major throwback during the Attitude Era, a bald guy with a goatee with black trunks and black boots, Bad News did it first. In the era of cartoon rock and wrestling, Bad News was a bald guy with a beard and black tights and black boots. And despite not having the colors of superstar Billy Graham or the moves of the American Dream, Bad News was still the baddest man in the whole darn town. Badder than old King Kong Bundy, and meaner than the Junkyard Dog. And some honorable mentions that just missed the list: the Canadian strongman Dino Bravo, the natural Butch Reed, the dastardly dangerous Danny Davis, the Bushwhackers, the All-American Boy WWF Champion Bob Backlund with big green belt, former Mr. Everything Pedro Morales, the Widowmaker Barry Windham, the Brainbusters Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard, rugged Ronnie Garvin, the Red Rooster, Dory Haas Funk to team with his brother Terry, the fabulous Rougeau brothers, the Powers of Pain, let's finally get that Barbarian figure. The Rockers will probably never happen as long as Sean is working for the WWE. The Human Wrecking Machine Zeus, Wendy Richter, who got done so wrong in the 80s considering she was such a huge part of the rock and wrestling connection. And Owen Hart unfortunately didn't work in the WWF in the 80s without a mask, and since his masked persona would be incredibly inappropriate, I'm going to make him the one exception on this list since he did technically work there in the 80s. And some enhancement talent to put your LJN superstars over. Leaping Lanny Poffo with Frisbee. Canada's greatest athlete, Iron Mike Sharp. Give him a giant bar of soap as an accessory. The Brooklyn Brawler. And the master of the self-backpat, Barry Horowitz. And some managers / valets. Sensational Queen Sherry for your Macho King. Sir Oliver Humperdinck to accompany your LJN Beast from the East, Bam Bam Bigelow. Virgil to accompany your LJN Million Dollar Man. And Cyndi Lauper for that long overdue Wendy Richter figure. And some ringside crew to help call the matches. Commentator Gorilla Monsoon to join Jesse at ringside. And if your original LJN ref gets wiped out, how about the greatest, Muhammad Ali from the WrestleMania 1 main event? And the Fink, Howard Finkel, to announce your new champions after the match. Thanks so much for watching the video and hitting the like button. Let me know what wrestling legends you'd love to see in the Big Rubber Guys line. You don't have to limit it to just 80s guys or WWF guys, so let's see that Road Warrior pop. And to join the tribe, hit subscribe. Good night, good luck, God bless, and Nerdmas Day.